What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you're excited to talk some free agency today. We're going to be talking about free agents on the Dallas Cowboys, free agents, well, players that are about to be free agents is probably the best way to put it. We're, of course, ready for the Super Bowl to be over. We're hoping the Kansas City Chiefs win it, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Let's go ahead and get to it. Make sure you subscribe right here to the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. By the way, we are on the road to 20,000 subscribers, so thank you very much to everybody who has been hanging out with us from day one. What you're looking at here is a list of all of the free agents that are currently on the Dallas Cowboys roster. Once again, players set to hit free agency. Two things for you. Number one, I know Tony Pollard's name is misspelled. Sorry about that. Number two, Rico Dowdle is a restricted free agent. He does not have the designation there like everybody else. So apologies, but nobody freak out. I'm going to take a look at these things. We've sorted them into three categories for you if it isn't obvious: offense, defense, and specialists. So let's go ahead and begin. Offensively, Cooper Rush is a free agent. And I'm going to say this a lot. If the money's right, I'm fine. There is not a name here that I am freaking out about the Dallas Cowboys having to retain. I do certainly, like a lot of you, want to see the Cowboys get very aggressive in not just free agency, but the offseason as a whole, trades, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But there's not a name here that I feel like is a primary sort of difference maker for them. And I say that with all due respect. So Cooper Rush is a very valuable backup quarterback. And I think the Cowboys got really lucky and we're very fortunate with how he played over the 5 games that he started for them this past season while Dak Prescott dealt with a thumb injury. It's not every day that an undrafted free agent has to start 5 games in his 6th NFL season and can win 4 of them. And so this is an important year for the Cowboys, and they're going to need a lot of continuity. And we've seen how valuable backup quarterbacks can be, not just as it relates to Dallas, but obviously, I mean, look at the Philadelphia Eagles. They had to play 3 games without Jalen Hurts. And granted, they lost all of them, and that's because Gardner Minshew is very good. You are maybe going to need a backup quarterback at some point in the NFL, so you have to be prepared. So my only sort of request to the Cowboys would be, if it isn't Cooper Rush, you have to take the position seriously. And the Cowboys did say on Wednesday at the Senior Bowl, we did a video with all of the updates that they offered, that they are committed to drafting a quarterback. I like that. Plan, develop, always be grooming somebody that is a staple of Mike McCarthy, but you cannot let Cooper Rush walk if somebody else was impressed with him and gives him, something he feels like he can't refuse. You cannot just say, here's our 5th round pick and we're good to go. If Dak gets hurt, so be it. No, if Dak gets hurt, he might miss 5 games and you might need somebody to steady the ship. So if it's not Cooper Rush, it has to be somebody else. Again, this is kind of an if the money's right player for me. Next up, Tony Pollard. I know, again, the name is misspelled. This one is really interesting. It's super unfortunate that Pollard had the injury. It felt like he was on his way to getting a big-time contract, and we obviously always want to see that for any player across the NFL. And if you had asked me at the beginning of training camp, I would have said, in fact, I did say that Tony Pollard is probably going to be playing elsewhere in 2023. And Ezekiel Elliott is not on the list that you're looking at here, but he is a player who the Cowboys could choose to move on from. He has no guaranteed money left on his deal. We did a video about that subject last week. And so this kind of comes down to how you feel about Tony Pollard at the fractured fibula and how quickly you think he can be back to his old self. This is an important year for Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott and the Cowboys as a whole. And you're going to have to surround Dak Prescott, with a lot of explosive, talented skill position players on offense. That's not to say he needs them. I mean, everybody needs them. We're not here to argue Dak, but Tony Pollard is one of those guys. So this is kind of the same sort of thing. If it can't be him like Cooper Rush, you have to make sure that you are bringing somebody else in. And I am not somebody who, if the Cowboys move on from one of Pollard or Zeke or both, that wants to see them spend their 1st-round pick on Bijan Robinson. Look, Rico Dowdle, let's go ahead and get to that part of the conversation here. Again, doesn't have the restricted free agency distinction, but he's not going anywhere. He was hurt last year. Rico Dowdle, Malik Davis will be a part of the running back rotation, obviously, next season. And so if that third player is a day 2 pick, day 3 pick, whatever, you could do a lot worse. But if you want to bring Tony Pollard back, I'm fine with it. If you want to place the franchise tag on him because you want to figure this out, you kind of want to see what he looks like post-injury. It's a little bit north of $10 million for running backs this year. That's okay, too. It's hard to find a way where they're going to mess this up. And I don't say that like, oh, classic Cowboys, they mess everything up. It just, it kind of is what it is. The injury is just such a bummer for Tony Pollard. We already talked about Rico Dowdle not going anywhere. They did place the franchise tag on Dalton Schultz a year ago. It was about $11 million. The Cowboys obviously got some production out of rookies Jake Ferguson, Peyton Hendershot, and it just kind of feels like Dalton Schultz is probably gone unless he's taken a very team-friendly deal. I know people were very upset with Schultz and the way the season ended, not getting out of bounds and then not getting his feet down in bounds. And here's the thing. If you and I, if it is our job to negotiate for Dalton Schultz. And our job is to get as much money as we possibly can for him. And we're rooting for that. We want to see players succeed and have, wealth and success, and we want to see everybody have that. Dalton Schultz got $11 million last year. He got a 1-year contract for $11 million. The rate for Dalton Schultz that the Cowboys defined by placing the franchise tag on him is $11 million. They said, you're worth $11 million per year. That was what placing the franchise tag on him effectively said. So if you're negotiating for him, why start shy of that? So it just kind of feels like he might wind up elsewhere. Maybe he winds up with the Chargers. Maybe he follows Kellen Moore over there. Who knows about that? But I think Dalton Schultz is out. T.Y. Hilton, look, I said this on an episode of the Ochoa with Keith McPherson from WFAN and MLB Network. That episode dropped on our podcast network on Thursday. We're going to drop it here on the YouTube channel on Friday. Keith and I were talking about different things, and the subject of T.Y. Hilton came up. And I say this with no shade because T.Y. Hilton was awesome, but we act like it was a lot, right? Like we act like when you think about it, you're like, I really want them to keep T.Y. Hilton. We act like it was a big kind of stretch of time. He had the moment on 3rd and 30, respect, not taking anything away. And he had some nice catches against the Titans. And that was kind of it. He had the first catch against the Niners, and you kind of thought, here it comes. But that was kind of it. Like, I do feel like we've sort of over-romanticized this tiny little T.Y. Hilton era. He's on the wrong side of 30 as far as positional evaluations go. It just kind of feels like he might wind up elsewhere. Obviously, we're looking at a list of free agents to be on the Cowboys, so we're not looking at potential free agents, but Odell Beckham Jr. lingers. I mentioned the Wednesday updates that we did. The Cowboys did say they would resume conversations with him in the offseason. Michael Gallup's not going anywhere. He's coming off the surgery, obviously, to his right knee now. CeeDee Lamb's not going anywhere. We'll do another video on that because he's eligible for a new deal. Maybe he gets paid. So you're talking about CeeDee, Gallup are back. You're probably going to add somebody. It just doesn't make sense that T.Y. Hilton's going to join the fold. It also doesn't make sense for Noah Brown. It's been fun. We've had some good times, but it just kind of is time to move on. All the best to him moving forward. Terrence Steele is a restricted free agent, so the Cowboys are definitely not going to lose him. But they do have to figure out what they want to do as far as it relates to Steele, to Peters, to Connor McGovern. Alec Lindstrom, something that they'll probably figure out. But those top three right there, as far as the offensive linemen are concerned, right over here, if I could point to the right spot. Jerry Jones did say on Wednesday in that video we talked about that they expect both Tyron Smith and Jason Peters to return in 2023. Terrence Steele is obviously the starting right tackle on this team, but he might miss the start of the season. And so if Tyron Smith is back, that'd be awesome. But Tyron Smith is playing left tackle for the Cowboys, in my opinion, at least. And so you're talking left to right. You've got Tyler Smith, Tyler Biadasz, who's in a contract year, Zach Martin, and Terrence Steele when he's healthy. But what if he's not? You're going to need Jason Peters. You're going to need that kind of, I hate to call it a swing tackle because he's just kind of your like reserve right tackle, kind of reserve left tackle. Obviously, we saw that in the playoffs, but Tyler Smith can obviously do it. My point is, I think that it just makes sense for Jason Peters. It's a local thing for him, makes sense for the Cowboys. So that wouldn't stun me. Like I said, Connor McGovern, I mean, if that's your plan, you really don't have room for him. And the Cowboys do have Matt Farniok, right? I mean, like I don't think that one works out. Moving to the specialist quickly, Brett Maher, the Cowboys said, again, there was a lot of information that they gave us on Wednesday. I would encourage you to either go watch that video or check out our article on the subject at bloggingtheboys.com that Brandon Lowy wrote. But the Cowboys said they would be starting over at kicker. It's so unfortunate what happened to Brett Maher. He had such a great season, and it was such a surprise. I know I've eaten a lot of crow on him. I feel for him that the season ended the way that it did. It does make sense that the Cowboys would move on. We're certainly going to be rooting for him moving forward. The Cowboys will have to figure out what they want to do at long snapper. Jake McQuaid obviously got hurt early on. Matt Overton replaced him. I imagine they bring one of them back. As it relates to the defense, that middle part of the column, or that middle column here, Leighton Vander Esch, I feel similarly, I think, to Tony Pollard. Leighton has been a great player ever since the Cowboys drafted Micah Parsons, right? It's like drafting Micah all of a sudden sort of, I don't want to say like reinvigorated him, but that's probably been the best football he's played outside of that wonderful rookie year. And obviously we all know how important he is, as I lower the volume on my computer here, and how missing him was such a big deal in his return. He was so great in the playoffs, but we're talking about now he's 5 years into his NFL career. And so, do you trust that? Do you want to build around that? If the money's right, I said to be saying that, totally, makes sense. He's definitely one of the higher priority names for me on this entire list. Might be the highest. I might care or value that more than even Tony Pollard, just because of how, I don't say easy, but how, much less difficult it is to find, adequate play at the running back position. So this one I would love to see work out, but I do think that Leighton played very well, and I think that other NFL teams are going to be very aware of that, and somebody might be willing to pay him. Anthony Barr, we'll see. I mean, I could totally see him coming back, see the Cowboys kind of liking that depth there. He was, kind of a late arrival, obviously joining the team at training camp. That is sort of a TBD situation. Luke Gifford, a valuable player on special teams, did have an offseason surgery. That was, again, part of all the updates on Wednesday. That also feels a bit of like a coin flip. Anthony Brown, I do think that Cowboys fans went a bit far with the vitriol towards Anthony Brown. And I think we saw that, right? This team is in desperate need of a starting outside corner opposite of Trayvon Diggs. And maybe they wind up going the Deron Bland direction, but especially with Jordan Lewis slated to return, obviously, and playing in nickel. So that might be the route, but it does also kind of feel like time for Anthony Brown. And we're looking at a reality here, by the way, where two of the final three members from the draft class of 2016 both leave the Cowboys in the offseason. I mentioned Zeke, obviously the first pick in that 2016 class, not a free agent, but the Cowboys could move on if they want to. They have, there's been some reports from the Dallas Morning News that he's open to restructuring. We'll see about that. But if Zeke is gone, that's one. Anthony Brown was a sixth-round pick in that 2016 draft class. People forget. And if both of them are gone, the last player left from the 2016 Dallas Cowboys draft class is, of course, the fourth-round pick, one of the fourth-round picks in Dak Prescott. The other one is a Jeopardy question for you, Charles Tapper. Hopefully you guessed that before I gave you the answer. C.J. Goodwin, valuable on special teams. Maybe they bring him back. I mean, again, none of these things are like really massively or dramatically affecting things, I don't think. And that's not to speak about these players. It's just, we're looking not necessarily at the meat of the roster right here. Trayvon Mullen, I imagine they move on. Dante Fowler, I mean, maybe. But Sam Williams coming along just kind of leaves fewer and fewer snaps for everybody else. I would love to see them bring Jonathan Hankins back. They obviously traded for him in the middle of the season. You could call that a little bit of leverage for Jonathan, I guess, in contract negotiations. It does feel like one of Hankins or Carlos Watkins will be back. I'm a fighting Texas Aggie, so I would love it if Donovan Wilson returned to the team. But the Cowboys do have a lot of options at safety. And I do think that what they do between Donovan Wilson and, I guess, Anthony Brown, I don't mean this like kind of, one for the other, but I think that how they handle in free agency in general with their own players and external ones, will affect, obviously, I mean, this goes without saying, but will affect what happens here because of the presence of Izzy Mukuamu, because Israel Mukuamu has the ability to kind of float in between. That may impact what the Cowboys are doing. So overall, I mean, you're looking at a list. Wanye Thomas, again, not a player the Cowboys are in jeopardy of losing. You're looking at a list of players who aren't, I mean, I'd be hard pressed to find one that is an absolute must keep. Maybe you put Leighton Vander Esch in that territory. Maybe you put Tony Pollard in that territory. Maybe you obviously put Jason Peters on some level, kind of sort of in that box because of the value of of offensive line depth. Maybe you put Cooper Rush there because of the kind of security he offers you as your backup quarterback. But other than that, it's just kind of a these are important, but we're the meat, to use that word, of the offseason for the Cowboys and what we want to see, the aggression that we want to see, is going to come by way of external free agency and obviously by way of the draft. So there is a value to retaining your own and keeping your own and paying your own. But I would argue the more important things that have to do with their own players this offseason for the Cowboys involve players who are not on expiring deals. We want to see the Cowboys get a long-term deal done with CeeDee Lamb. We want to see the Cowboys get a long-term deal done with Trayvon Diggs. It would not be a bad idea to already get a long-term deal done with Tyler Biadasz. He is entering the final year of his contract. He is eligible for a contract extension, having completed 3 years of service in the NFL. So those are the things that I think are a little bit more important. So we'll certainly be taking a look at that in the coming weeks. But for now, that's it. One last look. If you want to take a screenshot, go ahead. Just apologies for Tony Pollard's name being misspelled and Rico Dowdle not having the distinction there. It's all good. And let us know your thoughts. Who do you think is a must-have? Who do you think you're fine letting walk? What do you agree with or disagree with? Blah, blah, blah. We would love to hear what you have to say in the comments down below. My name is RJ Ochoa. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at RJ Ochoa, on TikTok at rj.ochoa. You can also send me an email, rj.ochoa@sbnation.com. So, yeah, I mentioned it. We have our interview with Keith McPherson dropping on Friday here on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel. And a little birdie told me that next week, in the lead up to the Super Bowl, we're supposed to have some fun times and some fun guests stopping by. Let's go ahead and get out of here. I hope you have a wonderful dinner, a wonderful lunch, and a wonderful breakfast, wonderful dinner, wonderful lunch, wonderful breakfast. All of it. I hope it's all great and delicious. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. We'll see you next time.